everybody. Thank you all for coming down tonight. We are live from Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida, so a note to our internet audience watching at home. If at any time during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of tonight's book, you can just call the number on your screen. We'll take care of that for you. We will have it signed, and we will ship it to wherever you are in the United States free of charge. Well, this evening, Books and Books is very pleased to welcome Ms. Mary Simses, presenting her new book, The Irresistible Blueberry Bakeshop and Cafe. Ms. Simses hails from New England, where she worked first in magazine publishing and then as an attorney. She now lives here in South Florida with her husband, who is also her law partner, and their 16-year-old daughter. This is her debut novel. In it, we meet Ellen Branford, who is going to fulfill her grandmother's dying wish to find the hometown boy she once loved and give him her last letter. She leaves Manhattan and her fiancé for Beacon, Maine, but what should be a one-day trip is quickly complicated, and as she learns about her grandmother and herself, it becomes clear that a 24-hour visit to Beacon may not be enough. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Ms. Mary Simses.
Thank you, Victor. And thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank Books and Books for having me. I'm going to take a cue from when I was in the corporate world and give you a little agenda so you'll know where I'm going. I'm going to talk a little bit about my book and how I became a writer because, as Victor said, this is my debut novel. I'm going to read a little section from the book, and then if anyone has questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. This book is about a 35-year-old woman who's an attorney with a large law firm in Manhattan. And she's leading a very successful, high-powered life. She's engaged to another partner in the firm. She's a partner herself. And one weekend when she's in Connecticut visiting her grandmother dies unexpectedly. And she says to Ellen, right before she dies, she says, deliver a letter for me. Deliver a letter. And I'm getting the fiction mixed up with the fact. I'll explain that in a minute. But she asks Ellen to deliver a letter. And Ellen finds the letter and discovers that it's to a man in a town called Beacon, Maine, which is where her grandmother grew up. And it's kind of a letter of apology. And it's clear to her that her grandmother was once in love with this man. So, not heeding what her mother and her fiancé tell her, which is just put the letter in the mail, she decides she will deliver it because her grandmother asks her to deliver the letter. So she drives up to this town in Beacon. And by the way, I'm not telling you anything that you won't find out from the very first chapter. She drives up to this town in Maine called Beacon, and shortly after arriving, she's standing on a dock taking a photo of the town. That's something I love to do. I happen to be a big shutterbug. So she's taking a photo of the town. She's got her Nikon up to her face. She's looking through the viewfinder. She falls through some rotted boards that are in the dock, and she gets swept away by a rip current. And then gets rescued by a local carpenter named Roy. And that's where the trouble/fun begins. I had never intended to become an author. I'm really on my third career. My third and last, I should say. This is my favorite career. This is the one I'm keeping. But, it all started really when I was a kid, and I love to write. I used to write these little stories, and I'd kind of staple them and make little books, and I'd illustrate them, and, I was just very interested in the world of fiction. In fact, there is an example of something. It's not a story, it's an essay, but I will show you, which is, I have to hold it. Okay, this is something I wrote, I think when I was probably about 8. Example of my early work. Someday this may be, in the Natural History Museum or something, but The thing I love about this is it's called At the Museum, and it was after a trip that I made with my parents and some of my cousins to a museum in Greenwich, Connecticut. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut, so I'm a Yankee. I apologize if that needs to be said to anybody, but and so we went to this museum, and what I loved about this was at the end I talk about the fact that we went into a room with planets, and the planets were orbiting or whatever. And I said, but there were only 7 of them. And that I find that kind of poignant, even to this day, that I was noticing, there were 2 missing. What's going on with the other planets? So, I had this inquisitive mind. And as I say, an example of my early writing. So I had a lot of teachers, fortunately, who, encouraged me and thought it was a good thing to keep me writing. I was doing short stories. I was doing poems in school. I had a great teacher when I was in middle school, when I was in 9th grade. And he happened to save something that I wrote to him at the end of 9th grade, telling him what a great teacher he was. He scanned and emailed this to me last year. July of 2013, when the hardcover book first came out. And he thought it was funny, especially because I had baked him a cake. I don't remember any of this, by the way. I remember none of it. But apparently I'd baked him a cake. And I really like the PS part that says, glad you like the cake. If I ever open a restaurant, you can have a free meal. And he thought that was kind of ironic based on the fact that I wrote this book that has a lot to do with food and bakery and things like that. So he was a teacher who helped really push me along with my writing, and he was very glad to hear that I got back to it after kind of a hiatus. So I had great teachers who believed in me, but I got to the point when I was in college where I thought, I need to do something practical. How many people can make a living writing books or writing stories? I just didn't think that was something, at least not something that I could do. Other people could do it, but not me. So I decided I would take a more practical path, which is one of the themes in Blueberry Cafe. The practical, what you think you should do versus what your heart really tells you to do. So I ended up getting a degree in journalism, and I worked for a couple of years when I got out of school for a trade magazine in Connecticut, not far from where I was living. And it was a magazine about magazine publishing, so it was interesting. It wasn't, I wasn't writing about, for Tire Tread Weekly or Pencil Review or something like that. It was, it was a pretty fascinating, fascinating trade magazine to be a part of. That was great, but it wasn't creative writing either. But anyway, I did that for a couple of years, and then I won't give you the long story. I'll give you the very short story. I ended up going back to school and deciding to become a lawyer. And that was also great. I was working for first a firm and then a large national corporation, as they always say on the game shows, in Westchester County, New York. And that was great. It was fun. I was working long hours, but I started to miss writing. It's one of those things where when you really, really love something, there's a little voice in the back of your head that says, do this, do this. And I kept thinking about writing. I hadn't really done any writing I did a little creative writing in college, but not much. And the problem was I would be driving along in my car and I would hear these voices in my head, not schizophrenically, just, dialogue, things that I would think might be interesting dialogue. And I'd be, just, as I say, driving, thinking about what people might be saying to one another and thinking, that sounds pretty realistic. I should write that down. Getting story ideas. I finally decided that either I was going to have a bad car accident or I was going to try to find an outlet for these things that were going on in my head. So I found out about a fiction writing class at a university that wasn't too far away in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I signed up for it. It was one night a week on Monday nights for 3 hours. We did have a break. And I went. I would work during the day, and then I'd drive straight up to this place. And I loved it. I got, I just kind of fell back into the thing of writing. And that's what got me going. I remember we had to sign up to write a story and read it out loud. And I signed up, and a few weeks later I read my story, and it was a great collection of people. There were working people like me who had been through school and were, coming back and just doing this because they loved it. Young college kids who were, there to matriculate and get their degrees. And this young man walked up to me and he said, at one point when you were reading your story, I was so touched I thought I was going to cry. And that was it. I was hooked. I said, if I can get that kind of a reaction from someone, it just sent chills up my spine. So from then on, I was writing. I would go to work. I would put in my long hours. I would come home. I was single at the time. Make my oatmeal or cereal for dinner, and get onto my computer and work on stories. And I managed to get, I think, about 5 things published kind of during that period, using the old idea that if you throw enough stuff on the wall, something will stick, enough spaghetti. So I would just send things out. And even when I was getting rejections, I thought, well, it's a rejection, but at least it's out there. I did get a lot of rejections. In fact, I have a sample of one that I particularly liked. It starts by kind of saying the usual part about, thank you for submitting your story. I'm sorry, but it's not right for us, or we can't use it at this time. But I love the last part that says, we enclose on the back of this a copy of our subscription form should you want to subscribe to our magazine. Especially love that it was on the flip side. They didn't even have to use another piece of paper. Needless to say, I did not subscribe. But I did. I even got something published in Tropic, which used to be a magazine that was published on Sunday. I see you shaking your head. As part of the Miami Herald. I got into a little writers group when I moved down here from Connecticut, and one of the people there read one of my short stories and said, you should submit this. And I looked to Tropic, and I looked at the word count that they wanted, and it was too long for the fiction count, but it was just about the right size with a few deletions for the nonfiction. So I submitted it as a nonfiction. It was all about infidelity and all kinds of stuff. That wasn't happening in my life at the time, thank God, but I submitted it, and it got accepted, and it ran. And a few weeks after that, I got a check in the mail for $300, which I didn't even know they were going to pay me for it. So I was thrilled to get this. Anyway, so things went on, and at the end of 1997, my husband and I moved from Connecticut down to South Florida because of his work. And about a year later, I gave birth to our daughter, who is now 16. And I kind of put the writing aside for a little while. Other life got in the way. But again, after probably about 4 or 5 years, she was back in school, I started to get the bug again. And I returned to writing through an adult ed class that the Kravis Theater housed in West Palm Beach. But I also had kept in touch with the woman who was my teacher at Fairfield U. In fact, I'm still in touch with her, and we're very good friends. And I would send her things as kind of an editor. She would work with me on stories. And I wasn't getting anything published. I was sending stories out again, writing new work, but nothing was getting picked up. And she said, the market for short stories is really, really tough. It's always been tough, but it's tougher even now. You need to write a novel. And I said, oh my God, I can't, that's not me. That's way too long. I couldn't imagine taking an idea or a character and extending it for more than about 20 or 30 pages. And she said, well, just think about it. Just put it in the back of your mind, and maybe the right idea will come along. And sure enough, probably, I don't know, some weeks after that, I was getting ready to go to our office, the law firm that my husband and I have, one morning. And I had the radio on, and I heard this story on the radio. This woman was talking about how her grandmother died, and right before she died, she said, erase my hard drive. And I kind of stopped and I thought, oh my God, what could be on that woman's hard drive that she wants to have kept a secret? And I was picturing somebody kind of like this. Okay, kind of like an Aunt Bee from Andy of Mayberry, trying to think, was she a spy? Did she have another life? Was she in the underworld somehow? What was it that this lady was, trying to keep secret? To tell you the truth, I don't know, because I never even listened to the rest of the story. I either walked away, turned the radio off, or whatever, but that simmered in my mind for a while. And it eventually led me to the idea of an 80-year-old woman who's sitting back, thinking about her life, and thinking about something that was kind of a secret to her that she wanted to remedy, that she wanted to make right. And that's what led me to the idea of writing this book. About the grandmother. So I started writing, and I was writing at all, I was still working, but not, kind of trying to think maybe I could actually make something of this idea and hopefully be a part-time lawyer and a part-time writer. But anyway, so I was writing at all weird hours, and my husband would come in or he'd turn over at 1 a.m. and see that I wasn't in bed, and I'd be over in this little nook in our bedroom, and I'd have my laptop going, and he'd say, "Oh my God, you're working on that book again." So it became known as That Book. Of course, when it got published, he was the first one to, pat me on the back, but, he just saw that it was taking a lot of time, and was worried, for me that, where's this all going? But anyway, I was writing at all strange hours and, getting it done, and kind of realized that the way I write is like having a movie going on in my head, where I see the characters, I see the scene, and probably because I happen to love photography also, that I set it as a scene like a photograph, and then I put the characters in there. And I can move them around and make them say things. And I was recently having a conversation with my friend Jamie, the one who was the teacher in Fairfield, and I said, I explained that to her, and she said, "Oh, that's really interesting." I said, "Why?" Because I figured everybody writes the same way, right? Every fiction writer must do the same thing. And she said, "Oh, that's not the way I get my, do my writing at all." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" And she said, "I hear the dialogue first." Kind of like me in the car, but when she sits down to write, that's the way she does it. She hears the dialogue, she creates the dialogue, and then she figures out where the people are going to be. And I think I kind of do the opposite. I set the scene, or maybe I do it all at once. But anyway, it taught me one thing, which is that there are a million different ways to get to the end product. But I found out that was my style. Very, 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 very visual. So in the end, this person who thought she couldn't write more than 20 or 30 pages had a first draft that was 550 pages long. Considerably longer than the book that exists today. So I was at the opposite end of the spectrum. I had to cut, which became easier the longer I let the book sit. I hired Jamie to be a reader for me, and because she's a great instructor and also a great kind of mentor editor. And so while she was going through the book, I didn't do anything with it. And when I finally came back to it about 6 weeks later, because she had some travel and things in between, so she didn't get to it right away, it was easy for me to see what I needed to cut. And I didn't even mind when she said to me very diplomatically one day after she sent me back her comment, she said, she always prefaces things by saying this, "I just want you to think of this. Just think about this. What if you cut the first 4 chapters? And so we get right to the action when Ellen is in Beacon and falls through the dock." And I thought about it for about 2 seconds, and I said, "Yeah, you're absolutely right. I had all this other junk leading up to it that wasn't necessary." And she also said, if this was a movie, all the other stuff would be going by when the opening credits are being shown, and then boom, you have this woman falling through a dock, struggling for her life, and then getting rescued. So anyway, so that's what happened. So I did it. I cut, did a lot of editing. And then I got really, really lucky because I happened to be at a cocktail party one night in Palm Beach, and I was, I think, on my 6th draft. I was about 2.5 years into writing this book. And there was a friend of mine there who our kids had gone to school together for years. They were going to school together then. I mentioned to her that I was writing this book, and she said, "Oh, I like the sound of that plot. It sounds like something I'd like to read. I'll read a copy of your manuscript if you want." And I said, that would be great. She said, I read all of Jim's stuff. Well, she was talking about James Patterson, the author. It's his wife, Sue. And I said, I never in a million years had, this was like the last thing on my radar screen. So, of course, that's not a difficult decision. Should I let Sue read she's read all of his stuff. I said, of course, I'll drop off a copy, which I did. And then I get this email several days later, and she says, Jim read a few pages of your book and thought it was well written. Is it okay if he reads the whole thing? Well, you can imagine how quickly I pressed the reply key and the caps lock and said, of course, yes, And then literally 24 hours later, I got another email from her, and she said, Jim finished your book and would like to talk to you about it. Do you want to come over tomorrow or Sunday or Monday at, she set out these times. I said, I'll be there tomorrow, thank you. And I took my laptop so I could type out everything he said, and I went over there and I said, I feel like I'm at the Oracle at Delphi. I got to take down every word. And it was great. I mean, I had met him before, but never in this kind of a context where it was, publishing. And he's extremely generous with his time, and he was just wonderful. He gave me some great tips and thoughts and ideas to strengthen the plot. Told me to cut 20 pages out of the first 60. It was like, oh my God, now I'm, mic feedback, sorry. Now I'm going, really in the reverse direction, shorter. But it was great. And then he said, after you make your changes, if you want me to take the manuscript to Little Brown, my publisher, I'll be happy to do that. So again, that was not a difficult decision. I said I would be really honored and grateful if you could take it. And, he cautioned me, which I already knew, that they might not publish it, but that he knew they would read it. And so, I didn't know what would happen. And several weeks went by, and one day on a Sunday morning, my cell phone rang, and it was Jim, and he said, are you sitting down? And I knew it had to be good news, and I think he was as excited as I was about it. So it was great. And I have a little, I'll come back to that. I'm in the wrong spot. So anyway, but that's what happened. And then the idea for Maine is something people ask me about a lot. Like, why did you choose Maine? So I did a little travelogue of slides. I don't know how many people in the audience have been to Maine, but it's a beautiful state. It's not a place that I had any kind of big connection with. Like, we didn't spend summers in Maine. I didn't have relatives there, but I'd been there over the years, just to different towns and places on the coast. Always thought it was beautiful, and decided that since I needed to send my character to some place that was very, very different from Manhattan, that would be a good place. I always kind of think that if the New England states were sisters, Maine would be the wild one. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's just kind of rugged and beautiful. So I decided it would be Maine. And when I actually made 2 trips up to Maine when I was working on this book. I made one trip when I was probably halfway through with the book, and then another one when I was maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through, because I suddenly got worried that I wasn't making the book authentic enough, that maybe it wasn't Maine enough, because I'm not a maniac. I haven't really lived there, just been a visitor. And so the purpose of the second trip, I scooped my husband up and I said, we've got to go up there. I have to kind of find Beacon. I have to find this town. Because I described it a certain way in the book, where the ocean is located, where the shops are, how many blocks. And I started to think, what if that really isn't the way a town in Maine looks? So we went to a bunch of different places and drove around and had a nice time and ate a lot of lobster. We didn't find Beacon. And I ended up realizing that it was probably okay, because Beacon is here. It's here, and it's going to be in the minds of my readers. And I've been very, very pleased to hear from people who will, send a note to my Facebook page, my author Facebook page, or my website, telling me that, they spent 20 years in Maine, or they grew up in Maine, or they summered in Maine their whole lives, and that they feel like I got it right. So that's a huge, I think, a huge compliment to me. But it's picturesque. It's got great places to describe, and it's beautiful. So that was kind of my main thing. Here's a picture of me and Jim. He was doing a book talk a book signing at Classic Books in Palm Beach, and I stood in line and I bought one of his books, and he kindly did a shout out to the crowd there about my book, and several people bought my book. He was a very, very nice guy. So it was about 18 months after Little Brown agreed to purchase the book, it got published. I think that's a longer gestation period than an elephant has. It was very, very long, but I learned a lot along the way, and it was just a fabulous ride. One of the things that happened after they bought it is that they sold the rights to a number of foreign publishing companies. And the foreign publishing companies can change the cover if they want. Actually, this one isn't a foreign publishing cover. This one is the original cover that Little Brown was going to use for the book. They started with the idea of doing, the outside of a bakery, and they had an artist do a pencil sketch. And I don't have any approval over the cover, but they were great in terms of always keeping me in the loop and saying, what do you think? Do you like it? So this artist did a black and white pencil sketch. And then she did a color pencil sketch. And then she did a whole painting, which is what this was, an entire painting, which I thought was, very cute. The salespeople then had a meeting. And my editor calls me one day, and she says, she's from South Africa, and I love her accent. She's great. She says, Mary, salespeople had a meeting, and they love your book, but they think the cover is just a little bit too sweet. And I said, okay. And she said, basically, they were going to go back to the drawing board and do a new cover. And I'm just, I'm along for this ride. I'm thinking whatever they think is good with me. And, they want to sell the book too. So I just said to her, do you know, when we'll see another cover? And she said, probably pretty soon, maybe in a few weeks. Sure enough, within 2 to 3 weeks, this appears in my email. Not this, the real cover appears in my email with the jar of jam. And I looked at it and I said, they're absolutely right. It's fresher, it still has the warm and fuzzy feeling to it, but I think this would have had a much narrower audience than that. So cheers for the salespeople. My publisher is fabulous. I happen to love them. I think they do a great job. This is, this is, I think, the Italian cover. Yeah, yes. Oh, are you fluent? Which is basically the same picture. So there, it's not really that different. This one is interesting. This is the large type version of the book in the UK. It's a completely different publishing company that just publishes like large type books, I guess, and other, related things. But so a different cover again. I thought very cute. Some days I just get these in the mail and I have to try to figure out what it is. This one is the Spanish cover. Love it. Time of Blueberries. I think that's really pretty. Love this one too. This is the Portuguese cover for the book that's was published in Brazil. Café do Cupcakes. I think that's really kind of different and cute. This one happens to be right now my favorite of the foreign covers. And the reason is because the book actually got to #1 on their mass market bestseller list. And it was published in Germany in April. It is still on the bestseller list this week at #4. Above Gone Girl and above Dan Brown. I mean, I can hardly believe it, and I know it won't be there forever, but it's like they've sold a lot of books, so thank you for giving me my little place there. Yes, I'm working on that one with my publisher. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's it. So anyway, it's been a wild ride, as I say. That's definitely the job I want to keep. And I thought I'd read a couple of pages, and then I'd be really happy to answer any questions people have and/or sign books, as they do on the nighttime talk shows before they show you a clip. I will set the stage. Ellen is at this little pub called the Antler. And she went there to get a dinner. She thought it would be quiet. That's what the woman who owns the inn where she's staying told her it would be. It's not. It's kind of raucous. And she sees these men in the back who are playing darts. There's a dartboard, and there's some guys sitting on a couch. And she hears this one guy tell another guy that he throws like a girl. And Ellen has had a few drinks because she's kind of become a local celebrity. I won't get into why. You have to read the book. But she's, kind of feeling her strength and decides to get up on a table and make a bet for $100 that she can play darts better than anybody in the place, including that idiot who told the other guy that he throws like a girl. She did play darts a little bit when she had her junior year abroad at Oxford, but I think her mouth is kind of getting ahead of her. So that's where we are. I've smiled and waited to see what kind of a mountain man would come out of the woodwork and take up the challenge. There was a movement from the sofa near the dartboard. Two men were sitting with their backs to me. One of them stood up, stretched his arms, and turned around. He began walking toward me. He was tall with dark wavy hair, a square jaw, and a slightly rugged face. He could have been anyone from an airline pilot to a logger. In another situation, he might even have been handsome. He was dressed in faded jeans, a pale blue button-down shirt, and a brown leather jacket. As he came forward and stepped into the light, I recognized the jacket and my throat tightened. It was Roy. "I guess I'm that idiot," he said quietly. "I'll take you on." I stepped down from the chair, feeling a chill of sobriety pass through me. The dock, the tired swimmer's carry, the kiss. What had I done? The last person in the world I ever wanted to see again, and now... "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I smiled and gave him a casual wave, as though none of this was a big deal. He put a bottle of beer and a handful of darts on the table. "I see you've recovered." "Recovered?" I picked up one of the darts and gripped the barrel, trying to get a feel for the weight. It might as well have been an anvil. He took off his jacket and put it over a chair. "From your swim the other day." I thought I saw a glint in his eye. "There was nothing to recover from," I said, holding the dart to my ear and extending my arm in a practice motion. He shrugged. "Well, good." Then he added, "Thanks for bringing back my jacket." I nodded. "No problem." I adjusted my grip a little, hoping to give the impression that these subtle moves were part of some complex strategy. "I didn't know the jacket was yours." He took a sip of his beer. "I hope you play darts better than you swim," he said, crossing his arms and peering at me. I hoped so too. Oxford was in the distant past, and I hadn't exactly been keeping up my game. I had a few of those drinks Skippy kept sending me, and "I can play darts quite well," I said. "Quite well indeed." I flashed a big, confident-looking smile. Roy cocked his head. "Well, name your game then. Cricket, 301, Shanghai?" I began to think, trying to come up with the most straightforward game I could remember, something that wouldn't involve complicated scoring because math calculations were not going to be my strong suit at the moment. Finally, I had an idea. I took a deep breath. "Okay," I said. "Dead presidents." Roy laughed. "Dead presidents? You want to play dead presidents?" "No, what I really wanted to do was get the hell out of there." "All right, tell you what. You hit Franklin first, you get to keep your 100 and another 100 from me. I hit it first, I get the bills." Roy took out his wallet and removed 5 20s, "but you've got to nail him in the face." "That sounds fine." I shrugged and waved my hand at him as if I did this every day. Meanwhile, people had come off the dance floor. A crowd had formed around us, and someone had turned the music down low. Beads of perspiration eased their way down my back. I began to feel a little hot, a little sick. Roy walked to the board and removed Jake's darts. All right, get it together, I told myself. Get it together. I rolled up my sleeves. Just get the damn things on the board. Don't throw buckshot and have them fly all over the place. He'll end up winning. That's a given. But as soon as he does, you get the hell out of here. Roy held a fistful of darts. Shall we warm up? He had the edge of a smile on his face as he presented the darts to me. I could warm up for a week, I thought, and it wouldn't help. I shrugged. Well, I don't really need a warm-up, but if you insist. I took the darts. Okay, let's get this over with. I walked to the tow line and stepped behind it. I tried to hold the grip as I would a pencil, the way Blake had taught me. But my arm felt like it belonged to somebody else. I raised the dart until it was parallel to my ear. Then I aimed and let it float. And that's where I will leave you off this evening. Thank you again so much for coming. I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has about the book or writing or anything. Any questions?
So
Yeah.
what are your future plans now that you have a bestseller book?
A European bestseller, I know. Something I never would have dreamed of. I am working on another book. And I have a deal for my new book with Little Brown and with the publishing company in Germany, Blandville, which is part of Random House. So I'm very excited about that. So I've been working hard and, trying to kind of maintain a similar balance that I did in Blueberry Cafe, where there's humor, but there's also kind of a poignant B story, B plot, and mix the two. So that's my plan, and I have until May 31st to present the manuscript. So I'm working hard at it.
What about the law practice? Are you putting
I've kind of eased my way out of that. Yeah, to my husband's chagrin, he lost a law partner. I'm still involved, administratively, and things like that. But I really, it takes a while. There's some days where I can do a lot of writing. There are other days where, as I said, other life gets in the way, and somebody forgets their computer at school. I wonder who that would be. I have to do some driving around or whatever. So, but yeah, I've sort of eased my way out of that. And although, as I say, I'm still involved administratively. So it's a great combination. It's a good combination. Yeah, I'm having fun. I'm doing what I really wanted to do from the time I was a kid. And so my advice to young people, if they ever want to hear it, is, basically follow your bliss. Do what you really love. Do what you love. So, and Ellen, she's got to make that choice. So it's not just me. Yes, Linda.
When I was reading the book, Mary, I felt like it was autobiographical. Was it?
That's a good question. Was the book autobiographical? Well, there are similarities between me and Ellen, but the story is not really my story. But, I made Ellen a lawyer because that's something I know. That was easy. I happen to love old jazz standards, and I love photography, and so I gave those traits to Ellen. And I realized, actually, as I was pretty far into the book, that the character of Ellen's grandmother, I think, had a lot of my mother's traits in her. And that the character of Roy's uncle had a lot of my father's traits in him. So there are pieces that do come in from real life and filter through the writing. But it's not what I'd call really autobiographical. Anything else?
Just curious, I know James Patterson loved it. Do you find, I haven't read it yet, I will, I look forward to it, but what's your gender split here in terms of your readership? What do you sense?
It's mostly women, but I am always pleased to see men in the audience, and I've had a number of men come up to me and say that they really enjoyed the book. A very good friend of mine who I grew up with, her parents are voracious readers, as is she, and they'll read like a book every day. They're retired and they love to read, and it's a great situation. So her dad read the book, of course, because I had written it. They've known me since I was a kid, and he said, I didn't know if I was gonna write, like her book, but I really, really did. He said I really enjoyed it. So, but it's predominantly women, I think, and it's been great because I hear from people who say, I bought it and then I gave it to my 15-year-old daughter to read, or I bought it and I gave it to my grandmother to read, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been kind of nice that it's a generational story. So I've been really pleased about that.
I'd just like to say that I so appreciate it. It was very refreshing there. You didn't take us to dark, dark places, and it was just wonderful. Tears at the end, all of that, and it took me back to my youth and reading novels at 18 to 20, 15, and it just was a wonderful experience. So I'm so happy you're doing well with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. I'd love to sign books if anybody has them.
All right. Well, then, if there are no more questions, then quick reminder for our internet audience watching at home, there's still time to call the number on your screen. Purchase a copy of the book, we'll get it signed for you, and we'll ship it to wherever you are in the U.S. free of charge. Also, a reminder that all of our live streamed events are archived. So if you don't catch it live, you could visit the Books and Books website, go to the live streaming link, and any event that's been broadcast from here at the store will be saved there for you to watch at your convenience. For those of you here in the house, we have the Irresistible Blueberry Bakeshop and Cafe in softcover. I should have mentioned that tonight we're here for the softcover release, but we also have a couple of hardcovers as well. Books are for sale at the counter over there. Mary's going to be signing over there at the little table to the left of the screen, and please, let's give her a big hand to our German bestseller.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.